Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I do art on ShawNshawN.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review the movie Us. So this is a new movie by Jordan Peele, and Jordan Peele's got started as kind of a comic, and he teamed up with this other guy, Michael Key, and they did Key and Peele, which was really funny. They did a lot of these skits with kind of a reversal of what you thought it was going to, and all their skits were kind of this direction, and this movie has a similar type of feel in that it's going one direction, and then there's this parallel line, and then they flip the switch, basically. Similar to how a lot of the Twilight movies, or not Twilight movies, but the Twilight show itself in the 1960s. There was another show, I can't remember the name, but there were two shows basically where they would have these weird things happen, and then boom, they'd flip the switch. Key and Peele had that a lot in their show, and Jordan Peele is using the same kind of switch in the movie, which you kind of want. You want a twist in the movie. It makes it a little more special than your average, linear plot. So the story starts off with this young girl. I think it was in, I want to say the 60s. And she's in Santa Cruz with her parents. Her dad starts playing this game. Mom goes to the bathroom. She wanders off. And she wanders off into this hall of mirrors. And it says, "Find yourself here." And she's like, what's this? And she goes inside. And it's kind of like a scary haunted house. And she comes to this mirror part. And then she find this reflection of the girls, but the girl doesn't move with her, and she's like, what's this? And turns around and it's herself. She's like, oh my god, right? And then boom, they switch it, and you're like, what is this, right? Where's this going? So fast forward, I think about 30 years. The girl has a family, and they're in Santa Cruz, which is close to this park, right? And she really doesn't want to go with her family, and her husband's like, what's wrong with you, dude? There's nothing happened. Let's go there. There's no issue. Nothing's going to happen, right? So they go to this beach with this other white family that's a colleague of the guy, and they're kind of trying to one-up each other, keeping up with the Joneses, buying the bigger boat, the bigger house, the bigger car, all that kind of jazz. Which happens a lot in corporate politics, especially if you hang out together afterwards. They go out there, and then obviously when they come back from the beach, there's this family that followed them home. And it turns out they look, similar to them, and it's like, oh my god, what the hell is this? And from there it just goes on to this kind of killing spree with the doppelgangers, and they're trying to figure out where these guys came from, what's this about. And so they have a twist of the story which explains it all, and it's kind of, brings the story together. I kind of had, for me, the twist didn't exactly work. There was some foreshadowing, but not quite enough. Somehow in the last movie he did, which was Get Out, it had much better come together of the parts. It just all goes together, but it's just not surprising at the end what happens. Again, some of the kind of when they go into the deep caverns of the carnival looking for the source of this evil, it has some of the same rooms you've seen in other horror films. So in that case, it's kind of not disappointing, but it's just like, okay, we know there's going to be like creepy stuff behind door number 1, door number 2, right? So it's good, but it's not quite what you expect. And I think the twist could have been a little better, possibly. But yeah, especially if they did more foreshadowing with the mother, I think. They did some, as a child, but not really her middle life, and that would indicate where it goes at the end, which would have been really cool if they had done that. If she had been more like, hey, I wanted it to quiet, and then you're like, why does she always want to be quiet? And that would have been really interesting if they kind of were to work that a little bit better. It's also disappointing too when the doppelgangers hit the next door neighbors, which is their friends. They just wipe them out instantly, and you're like, that's kind of lame, that kind of happens in horror films, but it's just, you'd figure people would be a little smarter, and they wouldn't be attacked as quickly. So that's a little bit of a letdown. The main letdown is just kind of this end where it's kind of predictable where it's going, or it's just not that scary in a sense. I don't know how you work that to make it scary. I mean, it would have been nice if they had masks, and then all of a sudden somewhere in the midpoint they unveil it, and then it's like, oh my god, this looks like a carbon copy. Maybe that would have been a little bit more punch to it. Time felt just about right. It's almost 2 hours, so it's going a little long. Over an hour and a half, which I think is kind of the perfection for a film. But you don't really feel it drag, so probably the timing and editing is good there. The interesting thing is, since they shoot this at Santa Cruz is kind of busy, but not super busy. It's obviously this really old school amusement park, and if you go up north, there's a little bigger, a modern version of San Jose and another modern version of San Francisco, but because there's 2 parks in the Bay Area, they're really smaller parks than the normal huge parks. Like I grew up in Chicago, and we had this huge park there, Great American. It was huge, and the one in San Jose is it's minuscule. I mean, they have some of the same rides, but it just feels like really small. And the one at Great America was just huge. Same at now I'm in Ohio, and they got Kings Island. It's gigantic, right? So those amusement parks are kind of substandard, I would say. And then you have Santa Cruz, which is just a minuscule, old school amusement park on the beach, and obviously it's very hard to compete. But because it's Santa Cruz to San Jose is probably an hour and a half or whatever, it's just, for kids, if they just want to hang out on the weekend, you just go down to Santa Cruz, right? So I think they'd have a good local population, but it'd be interesting to see if they have more of a draw to Santa Cruz because of this flick, you know, if it drives more interest in the park. I don't think it'll make any families any more paranoid than they are, but if they had done this script at, say, Disneyland, that would have been super creepy, dude. Because Disneyland has all these tunnels and stuff that are underneath the park. Like, they have really weird stuff at Disneyland, like you throw the garbage into the garbage and it literally falls down a chute. And it's collected below, so it never fills up, right? The trash can's always empty. So it's always this weird, like, oh, this is magical garbage can, you know? And Disney really works on making the magical thing. And then if you had flipped that and had this creepy part of Disney where they slaughter everyone, it would have been awesome. But of course, Disney's not going to prove that, right? So hence, you know, Santa Cruz is like, yeah, we need more propaganda. We need more commercials, right? Which is like, dude, you can do your own commercials, but... having a movie is a really great way to do a commercial, similar to how they introduced the Mini with the Italian Job. That was like one of the best car movies of our generation. You know, back other really good ones were Smoking the Bandit. They introduced the Trans Am, so that was a really great way for Trans Am, and they had a heyday of the Trans Am in the late 70s, early 80s, and then of course, you know, the Mini. It's still on its kind of heyday, but they haven't had another follow-up movie with Minis that's really cool. So. But that really showed off the coolness of the Mini, so this kind of shows off the coolness of Santa Cruz in a way. I think, you know, this movie would have been better if Jordan Peele had done similar to Quarantino, where Quarantino did a whole bunch of series of different style of films in every time. So he's never really the same genre, and every film feels very fresh, and he takes a fresh cut at a stale genre, and you're like, wow, what's this, right? And that's kind of what you want. And this is kind of a little bit freshening up of the horror film. But again, his last film was kind of horror, and this is another horror film. And you're just like, can you do anything but horror? You know, I think maybe mixing it up in there, maybe a comedy or, I don't know, maybe a chase kind of thing. Yeah, it could have been maybe, I mean, this is up his alley, and I think as far as Key and Peele, and then this is kind of a similar story, right? And overall, it's pretty fun. I think it might have been more interesting with some special effects or more gore. I'm not sure. It just wasn't that shocking. Maybe it's just these type of movies don't scare me anymore. I used to love this stuff when I was, you know, a teenager, but now it's like, I'm not gonna believe there's some underground craziness and there might be abandoned tunnels, but they're not gonna have social experiments on people. And you know, the plot line is like, okay, whatever, dude. I mean, if you're a teenager, you probably get a little creeped out by this, but...
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Spanish horror film, it's really dark and really creepy and just like...
Ugh, like, it's like so sinister in what happens, and it's just a little bit of gore, but it's just like so over the top, it's just like really grisly. This has a lot of blood early on, and then kind of, you know, you see blood spatter where they kill people, and you're just like... And, you know, it's like after you've kind of done that once, it's not... There's no shock value, right? So... Yeah, you gotta have something new. Like in Black Panther, they had like they're riding on top of the cars and you couldn't shake them off the cars. That was super cool, right? Here you have no superpowers for the creatures. They're just normal humans that are kind of possessed or something, right? Ghosts of themselves. So if they had some science behind that, it might have made more sense. Like some creepy scientists behind it, and they kill him and escape, you know, then it's like, oh, that makes sense, right? But otherwise it just looks like they were underground, and then one day they just said,
oh, I guess we can walk up.
Dude, you gotta have more than that, you know? It's just, no one's gonna stay underground for 20 years and then just be like one day, oh, maybe we should go outside and see the daylight. There's no sense of how they rebelled, and that's, I think that's the missing part here as far as how these guys got out of the underground and started attacking people. There's no, like, how they escape. Obviously, one of these doppelgangers are really smart, and that's why they escape, but no guards, there's no what happened, and you know, if they had guards down there or something that were slaughtered somehow, then that would have made sense. Like, oh, they just, otherwise it just looks like they wander up anytime they want. They just don't. And you're like, it doesn't work for me. It was a funny idea, I think. It just, somehow it doesn't work. There's just more stuff there. Maybe add scientists or some creepiness and have these scientists show up at the Santa Cruz and, you know, like, we're going to double this guy and then we're going to take him here. And then, you know, somehow that makes sense, but this doesn't make sense to me. Oh, I think it's a fun movie. Not going to be disappointing with that. I'd say watch it once maybe kind of movie. Maybe twice. I don't know. But any kind of, it's a scare movie. It's like after the scare is over, it's like, I mean, although there's some movies like Alien that's just like so freakingly well done. You're just like, oh, it's so scary. You got to see this. And I saw it in the black and white. And it was scary. So, like, if they redid Alien on the big screen, I would be like, that's huge, dude. But of course, they done all the follow-ups, so now it's like the first one's not going to be as scary, right? But it was so well done as far as the build-up. You know, maybe that's kind of the issue with this movie is there should have been more longer build-up, and then to kind of speed up really the bloodshed and getting to the end scene. I think that might have helped the film a little bit more, make the act 2 a little bit longer. Act 1 was probably about right. Act 2 just feels, I think it was done well, but yeah, I don't know. It just seems like there's something, a couple things that could have been done, especially the foreshadowing for the mother that would have been nicer. They did some, probably enough for most people, but I just felt, yeah, then that scientist, not like, why were they kept underground? How did they not be escaped earlier? That doesn't make any sense, right? You know, for teenagers, I think this will be a fun flick, so that's going to give my thumbs up. Hopefully you guys like it. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next painting movie review. Watch my painting too. All right, thanks guys.